Rev up your engines. Today I have a very interesting car. It's a Buick. We call them Buick Lacrosse here in the States, but it came from friendly Manitoba, the Buick Allure Super. Now, according to the owner, Lacrosse has some rather strange connotations, so they decided to call it Allure. Not a bad name, right? This guy bought this thing used. He put like over 40,000 miles on it. Look at the paint. Look at it. And you might think, hey, it lives in Manitoba. How come it's not all rusted up? He parks it in the garage all the time, unless he's going on a trip. So the winter, it doesn't see any salt on the road. He uses it only for trips. And of course, as I've explained many times, highway mileage on long trips is only equivalent to about 10-15% of stop and go city driving. So the mileage he's put on this thing are nice highway miles, hence it looks so good. But what makes this thing really interesting, it has a 5.3 liter V8. Okay, I'm not a fan of the active fuel management, but the engine itself, it's over 300 horsepower. It is a really well-made engine. As I've always warned people, the problem with American cars, especially the ones with bigger engines, is Americans never really got the hang of front-wheel drive transmissions. They just never did. And he said, sometimes it's a little wonky, but he put some of the wind's additive to it, and he said it made it a lot better. The engine puts out more torque than the transmission is actually rated for. So you're gonna expect a little wonkiness. We'll see when we take it for a road test. And I'm gonna put a full scan to see if there's any kind of tranny codes or anything. But really, this is a nice luxury car. Hence, he uses it for trips. My grandfather loved these things. He always loved Buicks because they're big, heavy cars. They're very comfortable. Driving down the road, you can just lay back and let the good times roll, literally. Now, he bought the car from the original owner and only had about 55,000 miles, or whatever that is in kilometers, right? He only had to pay 7,000 Canadian for this beautiful car. Now, he was amazed that the original owner had a hard time selling it. I'm not all that surprised because of one reason. Buicks are known as old man cars. All the young people, they don't want a Buick. Something that's smaller. Now, this is plenty zippy enough. There's nothing wrong with that. But they just see that Buick emblem and they think, old man, I don't want to be an old man car, right? Well, he's an old man and he likes the car. And he bought it from another old man. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And he's from Manitoba, so he's a Canadian. Well, let me tell you a hilarious story. My friend Dave, who lives north of Toronto, he went to a classic car show the other day, sends me an email, says, Scotty, I went to the classic car show, and he showed me some pictures, and he said, you know what? He says, there's only old farts like us at these classic car shows. And that's the case. Even though it's a beautiful car, but they're not a popular car. So as I said, these powerful engines, Americans quite never figured out front-wheel drive. The transmission was always the weakest point. So that probably tells me something about this car. He's put on 40, 50,000 miles more than what he bought it for, and it's still going pretty good. But I don't think he's a maniac driver. Are you a maniac driver?
I'm not a maniac driver.
I had a customer buy the American version, which was the Buick Lacrosse, right? And he bought it from an old man. He was a young man. He was in his 20s. He brought that car to me after he'd owned it for 4 months. The transmission and the engine were blown. And I said, how did you drive this thing? He said, oh man, he says, you know, it's a fast car. You know, I go 120, 130 on the loop, driving around and peeling out, doing burnouts. So he destroyed the car. He got an old man car and destroyed it. This was old man to old man. And he'll drive faster when he wants to, but this can handle it because of this engine. Yes, the trannies are somewhat weak, but they're weak from too much acceleration, not from speed. So if he wants to drive 100 miles an hour, flying through Manitoba or going to Alberta towards the Rocky Mountains, like I did when I was young, I was so bored on that road, I actually drove for an hour on the other side of the road, but nobody was coming the other way the whole time, right? You can go fast, you just don't want to jackrabbit it, that's all. And young people, they'll jackrabbit. In his case, that kid, he destroyed the car. I said, what'd you pay for it? He said, $5,000. I said, well, you can kiss your $5,000 goodbye. You need to get a slower car and take better care of it. Oh, we got the old auto, we plugged it in. We turned the machine on, it already detected it, do standalone diagnosis, and it's doing its thinking. See, it already read the VIN. It may be an older car, but GM has decent software for this kind of stuff. As we can see, it's 2008 Buick Allure, 5.3 V8, and so, but we can still do a topology scan of all the data systems, so still in really good shape. Dash isn't cracked. Nice leather. The wood trim's still in excellent shape. Lots of room in the back seat. No trouble codes. Now, when they say they don't make them like they used to in this case, it really is the truth, because Buick doesn't make cars anymore in the United States at all. And the reason they don't is the ones they were making were nothing like these old ones that could basically run forever. Check out some data here. We'll go to the engine. Now, black is good, red's bad. Let's start seeing what shape this thing is in. Mass airflow sensor's good. Map sensor's good. Closed loop. Short-term fuel trim. Look at that. 1, 2, 0. That's almost perfect. It's an older car. The long-term fuel trim is only 3%, which actually be happy with this old vehicle, because it's just adding a little bit of fuel, meaning it's running a little bit lean. These things are relative gas hogs. They got a big V8 engine in them, right? You don't want to run in rich and using more gas. You're actually better off having them run a little bit lean. Now, when he's going 70-ish on the highway, he can get 25 miles a gallon. For a big, heavy vehicle like that, that's good gas mileage. You know, let's face the facts. It's luxurious. That is not bad for a car this size with a V8 engine with this kind of power. Cars, they don't have oil pressure gauges anymore in most of them, but the computer knows, so we know what the actual pressure is, and that's good. So let's go to transmission control module. Live data. See if anything's squirrely in the transmission. And remember, black's good, red's bad. You see the pressure control is showing the actual current is 1.01, and the reference current is 1.01. That's perfect. You'd think it would be off a little bit, as old as it is, but no, it still works perfectly fine. So let's look at some more of that data. Check something out here. It's in park now. We'll put it in gear, and it's doing what it's supposed to do. See how it's slipping now? If your torque converter didn't slip when you were in drive and the car was running, the engine would stall out. So that's working great. Yeah, that's why standard transmission cars, you got to either put them in neutral, put your foot on the clutch, because they don't have torque converters. The torque converter's still working perfectly fine. Everything on it's good, so it's time to take it for a road test. And the old luxury car, and yeah, it's a luxurious ride. I mean, you feel like you're sitting on somebody's couch watching TV, you know? So here we go to our little road test, and since he doesn't beat it, I'm not going to do a full flooring until we get going 10 miles an hour like he said, because I don't want to wipe out his car. He knows he doesn't want to wear the transmission, which is the weak point of this car. It's working perfectly fine, driving it around at low speeds. It's shifting fine and everything. So we'll look behind us so we don't get rear-ended by some maniac, and there's no one there, so we'll take it up to 10, 15. Now we're gonna floor it. Whee! Ah-hoo! Hey, let me tell you, this thing has balls to it. There's no arguing that. That's what wore them out with people. The trainings would go out because people would drive them too fast. It's a very stable car. You jump in this thing, he drives it to Florida, Manitoba, Florida, and back it up. And it's a nice car. My grandfather drove from Florida to Niagara Falls back and forth in his Buick. But hey, if you can find one for another old man who took care of it like the original owner did, I'd buy it from him, but he's not going to get rid of it. He loves the car. Hey, it is a nice riding car, and he only uses it for trips. Relatively low gas mileage on stop-and-go traffic doesn't affect him much. He's taking it on trips all the time. It's like some of those big Ford trucks now. Some of them get in the 20s on the highway if you're going 60. In town, they might get 12. Well, you really don't care if you're driving on the highway all the time. It's all a great running car, but he seems to have a little bit of a problem in the front suspension there, so let's get my jack out. Well, check the bottom. Now, he's got Bilstein struts on it. Take a grab and see what we can feel. Not the wheel bearing or anything, so. Now, somebody told me it's a wheel bearing. 40,000 miles ago, he's still driving it. Wheel bearing's a roar. It's not roaring at all. Now, let's let it down fast and listen. It's the strut. It just bounced. So when he told me that Bilstein struts, I thought he meant that he put Bilstein struts on it. What he meant is it still has the original Bilstein factory struts. The thing's 16 years old. You really need to replace them, but unfortunately, he said they don't make Bilstein struts for this anymore. Thinks he can get some AC Delco. He could try that out. Now, here's the interesting thing. He said it's been doing it for about 40,000 miles, right? Well, the thing is, when it's internally worn like that, it still rides okay. But you saw that when we jacked it up, it was smooth and then it went clunk. And so that's what's happening when you're driving down the road. On a smooth road, you don't notice much. But when you get a bigger dip or a harder corner, then it's expanding and contracting more. And that's when you get that, So It just needs the struts replaced. I mean, with this kind of mileage, it is a front-wheel drive vehicle, big V8 engine, big transmission, all the weight's in the front. He can leave the rear ones alone. They're not acting up at all. He needs to put a pair of struts on it. But hey, with this age and that kind of miles, that's to be expected. It still handles okay. I mean, he went from Manitoba to Florida. He's going back to Manitoba, and it handled good enough. I could feel it a little in the steering wheel, a little bit of the binding when you hit a certain bumper corner too fast. If you drove like a maniac, you'd notice it a lot more. But I mean, really, V8 power and a beautiful looking Buick. Hey, it's a shame they don't make cars like that anymore. The time has passed them by. I would say this is probably the last really good Buick that was ever made. Yeah, they went the wrong way down the rabbit hole. Most of them come from China. They're made in China. GM's got a giant factory in China. They make all kinds of stuff there. This one was made in North America, and it was made, well, look at that thing. Still looks good, still runs good, a couple of struts, and he can go down the road, maybe drive a little bit crazier. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.